Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome to Frist Parish, Unitarian Universalists of Arlington.
We choose.
We choose.
We choose to be
A liberal religious community,
Welcoming.
welcoming to all.
We encourage each other
on our spiritual journeys.
Support one another.
Through the changes in our lives.
And challenge the excesses
and injustices of our time.
Called to love.
to love
To love.
and upheld by joy.
We live our faith.
Good morning. I'm David Whitford, one of the volunteer worship associates at Frist Parish. There are 5 of us in this role. We meet once a month in Marta's office, and each time we gather before we get down to business, we recite our covenant. It begins with, we commit to creating space for and giving shape to worship at Frist Parish. And it ends a few sentences later with, we commit to deepening our own spiritual lives and encouraging each other on that journey. In that spirit, I invite you to settle your body, open your heart, take a deep breath or two, and pray with me. Spirit of life, wellspring of love, may we lift up Marcia Kaddish and Tanya McCloskey of Malden, Massachusetts, the first same-sex couple to legally marry in the United States. McCloskey died in 2016 of endometrial cancer, with her wife by her side in the hospital and in hospice, as was by then their ordinary legal right. May we pause in gratitude on what would have been Kaddish and McCloskey's 20th anniversary weekend. Spirit of life, font of mysterious associations, memory wanders as memories will to another pioneering gay rights activist, longtime Frist Parish member John Harrison, who so loved the spreading maple on the front lawn of our meeting house that each fall, when its color reached its peak, he would light a candle of celebration in its honor and urge us to bear witness. John Harrison, who was the self-proclaimed first openly gay member of Frist Parish, whose stirring endorsement of inclusion was a deciding factor in this congregation's unanimous vote in favor of becoming a welcoming congregation, explicitly dedicated to the full inclusion of lesbian, gay, and bisexual persons, a designation we achieved in 1997, 1 year after Harrison's death. Spirit of life, wellspring of justice, may we honor the memory of another longtime Frist Parish member, Ann Mathis, who died March 27th, and whose memorial service was here in the sanctuary yesterday afternoon. Ann Mathis, pediatric nurse practitioner, mother of Hannah, active all her life in the struggle for racial equality in all its manifestations. Spirit of life, wellspring of compassion, may we hold in our hearts former worship associate Mary Beth Landy, whose wife, Rachel Mason, died suddenly of unforeseen natural causes on May 7th at the age of 46. Spirit of life, wellspring of tenderness, may we hold in our hearts Julia Jonathan and Meg Candelori, beloved members of Frist Parish now in hospice care. May Julia and Meg and their families find solace in the love that surrounds them. Spirit of life, wellspring of commitment, may we recognize with gratitude and respect all those who have made the choice today to be present in the sanctuary and on Zoom for worship and after the service for what promises to be a historic annual meeting. Please join me now in 2 minutes of silent reflection.
Today is the annual meeting of Frist Parish. The members will vote on officers and adopt a budget for the coming year. And we will also consider 2 resolutions. The first concerns reckoning and repair with regard to our early involvement in the slave trade. Like neighboring communities, approximately half the founders of Frist Parish owned other human beings. The second resolution concerns the involvement of our forebears in the displacement and persecution of indigenous peoples on this land. For approximately 2 years, 2 task groups have been hard at work, researching, preparing, making contacts in the larger community, listening, and amending draft resolutions. I ask now if you are serving on the Reckoning and Repair Task Force or the Indigenous Task Force, I ask you to stand and remain standing. And if you attended any of the programs, discussions, and forums offered by these groups over the last 2 years, please stand and remain standing. And if you have read the draft resolutions that were sent with the warrant for the annual meeting, I invite you as well to stand or raise your hand. I congratulate you, each and all, for practicing good citizenship, what used to be called good churchmanship. Wherever you stand on these resolutions, you have participated in the process. Let's give them a round of applause. You may be seated. Now, those standing should not give anyone the impression that we are of one mind. Many support the resolutions, and many have offered thoughtful changes and dissent along the way. Today's votes will be by paper ballot, and I dare not predict. But I remain grateful for the work and the commitment of all. Now, this morning, I'm not going to preach on either of these issues. You have heard plenty from this pulpit over the last 2 years, from Reverend Erica, from me, and from various guest preachers. There has been talk about the history of slavery in New England, of persecution and the current conditions of indigenous peoples. There has been reflection about collective responsibility and the theological idea of sinfulness and the notion of teshuvah, or repentance, and of tikkun olam, or repair, about forgiveness and apology and beloved community. I needn't repeat those themes today. But I do want to go back for a moment to the Troubles. Some of you have heard me call it that, the Troubles. When the members of Frist Parish voted to call me as your then solo minister 15 years ago, that's the spring of 2009, the leadership and the congregation had been through a rough patch. The senior minister had contracted Lyme disease and had to take medical leave. People had opinions. The governing board, our parish committee, had to navigate that and more. When I heard about this conflict, I listened to people describe one another as simply supporters or detractors, and nothing more. Now, despite the troubles, I saw great health in this congregation past that immediate hard time. I saw a congregation of extraordinary giftedness, vision, and commitment. One telling sign for me was the cover letter that the search committee sent with its materials about Frist Parish. They knew that the recent conflict might scare away possible candidates, and so they named it in their opening letter. They spoke the truth in love, and I took that as an enormous sign of well-being. Now, a lot of us have a hard time with conflict. We know how to avoid it, deny it, sublimate it, internalize it, but not so much how to enter into it, stay with it, and navigate it. A common notion is that conflict is something to be resolved. Several years ago, a Presbyterian minister named Wes Avram wrote an article for a journal published by Yale Divinity School. It's one of my regular periodicals. In it, this Presbyterian pastor says that he used to believe that dialogue was the answer to conflict. If people of good faith would just come together across their differences as ready to change their own minds, as well as change the mind of others, they could clarify their differences in ways that were not damaging to each other and move forward together. They could look upon the conflict as temporary and fixable. He wrote, "I really believed that, and then I went into the ministry." The title of his article was "Stop Resolving Conflict." And his thesis went like this: conflict is inevitable and part of the human condition. So why not stop treating conflict as a temporary breakdown and instead start treating it like standard procedure? Stop pouring energy into resolving or making conflicts go away. Instead, normalize conflict. Create and nurture communities that are both productive and conflicted. I am reminded of the text adopted by the worship associates in 2015 that appears each week in your order of service. Today it is on page 7. The headline is, "You sing my hymn, I sing yours." In that statement, the worship associates declared that the goal is not to get us to a place of agreement on theological matters. Instead, we are going to treat our different perspectives about God, the meaning of life, the cause and purpose of suffering, much the way we treat differences in taste and styles. We here give one another the room to have different preferences and ideas. I will sing a hymn you find enjoyable, even if it is not my cup of tea, and I hope you will sing mine. We will give to one another the room to hold different beliefs as well as preferences. Over the years working in congregations, I have come to see that the goal is to keep some issues unresolved, to keep our differences alive and in a healthy tension. Let me say that again. The goal is to keep our differences in a healthy, perhaps even playful, tension. Now, of course, there'll be decisions to make along the way in order to move ahead. For example, some of us are naturally optimistic and bold, and others of us are realistic and cautious. Still, we must and do pass budgets. But even as we do not wipe out the other point of view or the people holding it. Following the Troubles here at Frist Parish, I was cast in the role of healer. Now, there were lots of leadership development tools, lots of techniques that come out of fine church consultants and out of places like Harvard Business School. And many of these sources are on my shelves. But I have a confession. I did not follow some crafted technique. My mission when I came here was far simpler. I took as my call to get you to stop identifying one another simply as supporters or detractors. I wanted our congregation to see one another as more than where any of us stood on a particular issue. And so the first change I initiated was both expanding and deepening the lay ministry program. I wanted it to be larger in scope and involving more people than it had up to that time. I also worked to build up our covenant groups, and I offered adult education programs. I was in the business of getting people to know one another. I wanted you to know that Karen Sandrew is a great torch singer, as well as a person who had opinions in the midst of these troubles. I wanted you to know that Kiki Giadas, the chair of the parish committee, had a husband of beloved memory named Red, and that she was crafting a gracious life in the wake of unexpected widowhood. I wanted you to keep in mind that Anne Goodwin's mother, when she was growing up, was a nationally recognized director of religious education. I wanted you to know that the Tosties, Barbara and Al, have a daughter whose cremains rest in our courtyard. I wanted you to know that Bonnie Zimmer cut her therapist's teeth working with survivors of domestic violence, and that Lois Fine has a tree that she visits every day in Dennehy Park, and that Jeff Roberts worked in the Peace Corps. I wanted you to know that John Hodges is a committed rational humanist, and that Jennifer Kobayashi has a deep spiritual side. I wanted us to be able to differ in our opinions at Frist Parish and in the world and in our theologies at the same time that we knew and cared for one another. For it is said that evil occurs when someone makes another the other. The psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk wrote one of the best-selling books of our time, The Body Keeps Score. It is about trauma and healing from trauma and has sold millions of copies. Van der Kolk wrote, knowing that we are seen and heard can make us feel calm and safe. Being ignored or dismissed brings on estrangement and anger and even a sense of injustice. Perhaps this is the cause of so much of the division and venom in our country today. We are engaged in a struggle of recognition. There are peoples who want to be seen and heard and feel they are not. The truth is, we all want a place where we are seen and recognized and belong. And that is why congregational conflicts can be so tender. In this room, we have different stories and backgrounds, different political leanings. We disagree. And through it all, we want to know, every one of us, that there is still an outstretched hand, still placed for us at the table, still an unconditional welcome to you and to me. Holding open that kind of space is central to why we are here. We have within us this desire, this longing to be part of something larger, something more. And when we find it, when we find a place where we feel at home, where we can be ourselves, it brings tears to so many when they first sit in these chairs. We want to be able to be ourselves, speak our bit of truth, however contrary, and still be embraced. Charlie Duffy and I met 8 years ago and married last August. Online dating involves meeting people outside your customary circle. Through the people I met, I was being introduced to all sorts of new things. New music, new authors, new ways of being in the world. People are an amazing array of proclivities. With Charlie, I went to my first and only Harvard-Yale football game. With Charlie, I learned the name of the panhandler at Alewife and Mass Ave. At every red light at that corner, he and Charlie talked. "Hey man, how you doing?" And with Charlie, I entered briefly into the world of curling. Before COVID, Charlie curled every week and competed in Bonspiels. Isn't that a word? And competed in Bonspiels. That's the word for curling competitions. How many of you have ever curled? There are a handful. There you are. Okay. And how many of you have seen curling? Great. Curling dates back to the 16th century in Scotland, but it didn't become an official sport in the Olympics till 1998. The game is played on ice and is a bit like pool or bocce. Two teams, each made up of 4 individuals, aim to slide or throw stones that weigh about 42 pounds toward the center of a target, which is 126 feet away. Each member of the team has the opportunity to slide a stone. As the stone makes its way down the icy path, 2 other teammates use brooms to strategically reduce friction on the ice, or not, to control the speed and the trajectory of the stone. After all the members of each team have gotten to slide 2 stones, the round, or end as it is called, is complete, and the next one begins. For each stone that is closest to that center target, the team earns a point. Like a good partner, I chose to support Charlie by attending one of these bonspiels. And I assumed it would involve a rowdy, competitive spirit, complete with loud and maybe even rude rooting and cheering. But I was wrong. In curling, tradition and etiquette are abundant. Curlers are all genders and all ages and all backgrounds. And being a good sport is paramount. At the beginning of each game, you are to greet the members of the opposing team with a handshake and tell them your name and wish them good curling. They really do that. You are to make sure everyone knows everyone else. Imagine such hospitality before a row or competition. And when someone makes a good shot, whether they are teammates or opponents, you are to congratulate them. Whether you are a player or a spectator, cheering a missed shot is considered poor taste and poor sportsmanship. It is as if we were to say to someone with whom we disagree, "Interesting, good point." Each curling game ends with a handshake, and again the phrase, "good curling." It is expected that the winners will buy their counterparts the beverage of their choice after the game. And it is considered rude if you don't stay after the game to enjoy that beverage. I went to one of these things, and everybody sits around, both teams, engaged in lively conversation. They talk about the game and their lives beyond the game. This is what I learned. Curling isn't just a game. It is a way of life to which we can aspire. Even here, in the tender place we think of as a religious home. I dream of a religious community where we are greeted and seen, known and recognized, each of us, with all our stories and our crazy ideas. I dream of a religious community where when we disagree, which we surely will, we are remembered in all our fullness. And when we clash, we ask one another, "Can you tell me what makes this important to you?" Or imagine this. What if before making your case, you were to say, "This is an important topic. I'm curious to hear what people who disagree with me think about this issue." And what if after making your argument, you closed with, "I recognize that not everyone sees this in the same way, and I would like to better understand where other people are coming from." I dream of a religious community where we approach one another with a willingness to learn. And I dream of a religious community like curlers after a skirmish who practice turning toward one another, and where if we are the winners, we are the ones to buy the first round of drinks. On Pentecost, a Holy Spirit, a great wind, moved amidst the disciples. But hear this: the miracle of Pentecost was not that people spoke in tongues. It was that people speaking in different tongues, different languages, were able to understand one another. The miracle is the understanding, not the tongues, the understanding. Yehuda Amici wrote, "From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard. Good curling." Amen.